So you know how I told you not to use your mom as a beta reader? That is because no one is a hype man like your mom is a hype man, and that is especially true for me. And likewise, nobody likes my books the way my mom's book club likes my books. So just like I did for my first book, I went home to my mom's book club in North Carolina to talk to them about my second book, do a reading, and answer some of their questions. And honestly, it was so much fun. It was just chef's kiss. It was the best experience, and I cannot wait to share it with you. In case you have no idea who I am, my name's Sam. I'm a romance author, and I live in the UK, but I'm from the US, and most of my family lives in North Carolina. I try to get home as often as I can, especially now because one of my sisters has kids, and my husband Alex and I got to go last week. My sister and her kids drove in from out of town, and we got to just have a nice, relaxed time together. And I also got to go to my mom's book club where I was the guest of honor. I'm gonna show you some snippets from the book club and some of the discussion that we had. But first, I've got just a couple minutes of our trip for you to see so that you can have a look at all the lovely things we got to do and the people that we care about the most.
Blue dude, blue moon, kind of mysterious, shaded with someone I'm not really into.
It's a good little bicep workout.
Do you need to fix it? Talking bullshit. It's hard to see you when your eyes look dull.
Happy birthday.
Who's gonna save you? Who's gonna make you
to you?
not blue?
Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy birthday to you.
Blue dude, bad mood, sort of witty and jaded, but let's not talk about you. Your coyote song on a rerun. Are you hound dog tired, singing all night long? Who's gonna save you? Who's gonna make you not blue? Not blue. Blue dude, blue moon.
Yeah, as you saw, we celebrated my granddad's birthday, and I don't know if you could see the emotion in his eyes, but I definitely can when I look at that video, and it was so special. He turned 87, and it was a privilege to get to spend his birthday with him. It's not something we've gotten to do in a long time. Also, I got the cutest jeans while I was there. I'm wearing them now. Anyway, sorry, you didn't come here for a fit check, you came here for a book club.
Oh, the book?
So let me pull open my notes. It was a very long discussion. The video that I have is over 2 hours long, but don't worry, I'm only going to show you a few snippets of some of the things that we discussed, as well as only short snippets of the readings that I've done. By the way, I am going to be slightly spoiling book one. I have heard from a lot of people, including a couple people at this book club, that you don't need to have read book one in order to enjoy book two. I won't be spoiling book two. But if you wanted to read book one, I am going to be spoiling that by some of the things that I'm talking about in this video. We did spend an awful lot of time on the fact that The Summer Wedding in Santorini has a lot more spicy scenes than The Summer House in Santorini. Everything in book 1 was very fade to black, whereas there is a lot more explicit adult content in book 2, which was a little bit weird that my mom and sister had read that, but what can you do? And apparently when someone asked my sister if I was writing that from experience, she said immediately and very firmly, no, she has a really good imagination. I've cut most of that conversation out just because, to be honest with you, it's a little bit hard to hear in the video because everyone's like contributing to the conversation, but in a way where people are talking over each other. But of course we started with a reading from The Summer Wedding in Santorini from chapter 1.
God, this is a long chapter that I promised you I'd read.
Read the whole read the whole thing.
Okay. All right, so this is from chapter 1. She took the socks out of the bag and walked over to Nikos's dresser, sliding open the drawer. But as she tossed them in, she saw a small bright patch of red peeking out from between his things. Anna's heart was suddenly in her throat. As she stared down at what she knew was a ring, she felt emotions welling up in her.
For the whole discussion in general, I wasn't really sure how it was going to go, if they were just going to ask me questions, or if they were going to want me to like have talking points, or if they were just going to talk about the book the way they would if I hadn't been there and I was just going to get to be a fly on the wall. And they did a little bit of the first and last of those, so they did ask me direct questions, but a lot of it was just them having conversations amongst themselves, which again is why I've had to cut some of it out because it's not really easy to hear on the video. But it was amazing as an author to get to sit in while those conversations are happening, because it's not something you usually get to do. And definitely they were not couching their opinions and what they had to say based on the fact that I was there or that my family was there. From there, the book club started to talk a lot about how Anna and Nikos aren't really talking to each other very well throughout this book. In romance, there's this thing called the miscommunication trope, which is basically like there's a misunderstanding between characters and it causes a lot of turmoil and it causes a lot of the conflict within the book. And one of the worst things that can happen is for you to look at a book and say, if they just had a single conversation that would have been really easy to have, this whole thing could have been avoided. And as a reader, because of that, I don't tend to gravitate towards the miscommunication trope because it really annoys me. But interestingly, this book is technically miscommunication trope. If there were a couple of really key conversations that happened, a lot of this conflict could have been avoided. However, what I intended and also what I understood from the ladies of this book club is that the conflict makes sense because they understand why they're not having these conversations and they understand why the resulting conflict needs to happen in order for these conversations to resolve in a satisfying way. So basically the gist was that they were fine with the fact that it was miscommunication tropey and they thought that it was well executed, which was a big sigh of relief for me because that's something that I feel really self-conscious about, I guess, with this book. Then we talked a little bit about how the grandmother character plays a lot more of a role in the second book, why that is, and what the intention had been for the first book.
In the first drafts of the first book, she was a lot more present, and that was actually why I chose my pen name at first, because that's Grandma's maiden name, and like that relationship was a lot more key in the first book. In the early drafts, didn't really end up that way, and so yeah, I was trying to really intentionally bring her back into the story a bit in this one.
Then my mom asked an interesting question about Anna.
What do you feel has changed the most in Anna's character in the time that's passed between books? So, as Jennifer said, 4 years. How has she changed for the better, and where does she still need to grow?
And we're gonna come back to this question later when we're talking about Anna being a likable or unlikable character. But most of the discussion as a result of this question at this point in the book club was still around how she wasn't talking to Nikos the way they expected her to based on how ballsy she was. They understood why she wasn't, but the changes that had happened from book 1 to book 2 were that she felt a lot more self-assured, and they were frustrated on her behalf that that self-assurance didn't translate into the confidence to address this with her partner. Now, if you have read book 1, you may be surprised to hear, or have been surprised to read, that Anna and Marcus are working together at the beginning of the book. And the ladies were very surprised by this as well. And in fact, some of them that hadn't even read book 1 were surprised that they were working together based on the parts of their shared history that were laid out at the beginning of book 2.
I have to say, and you've not read the first book, right?
Right.
Okay, yeah.
He didn't have to serve that role, which meant that he could be almost more of an ally for her, even if that was unexpected. Yeah.
Then there was a lot of good conversation around the struggle that Anna has between her career and her relationship. And given that this was my mom's book club, a lot of the women are sort of her age and her stage of life. And they all pointed out something that I don't think I would have realized was true to this extent, but that is still a really new problem for women to have. That most of them, well, all of them from what they said, that wasn't even a consideration for them. They would have been expected to give things up as soon as they were ready to settle down.
I think it's a story that a lot of people, I would say probably mid-40s down, experience more.
My sister and her friend were there, and it was really interesting to hear them talk about how it was a lot more relatable for them.
We talked about like all of their like arguments and stuff are so realistic.
So then we get into the gritty stuff when we start talking about Maria. And if you've read the book, you know what this is, but there were a lot of opinions on this.
Like him having this girl with
Emotional.
for 2 years.
Emotional.
Yeah, and she had no clue that's her like best friend. That really
So what
hit me
would you
hard.
have done if you were Anna and you found out about that?
Also, I was really worried about this conflict because once everyone had read book 1, they all loved Nikos. And I didn't want to ruin Nikos for readers of book 2, but I also needed this conflict to happen. It just was the right conflict for the story. And I was really worried that I would like turn people against him. In the discussion, it was clear that while people were really frustrated with him, they understood the situation and it didn't make them like him any less, which was a relief.
I like Nico.
Speaking of unlikable characters, unlike Nikos, Anna in the first book was not super well received. A lot of people really didn't like her. And I, as the author, understand why that is because she was still really finding out who she was and what she wanted. But it did mean that in the second book, I wanted to kind of redeem her a little bit. And I think that a lot of that growth that's happened in her character makes her a bit more likable and a bit more empathetic. Though I did make sure that she was realistic. She wasn't like the victim in this story. She did annoying and awkward and petty things. They still, again, understood why she was doing those things, understood why she was making the assumptions that she was, and they empathized with her. She was a touchstone character for them, maybe in a way that she wasn't in the first book for some people.
But you when they went on the girls' trip and Anna was the one who said the awkward thing. People were angry with her.
Yeah.
We don't usually read situations like that. That was such a, like when the main character, the one that you're pulling for, is the jerk. Yeah, she sort of, yeah, she said some stupid things and her friends were friends enough to call her out on it.
Also, this was about the time that my microphone died, so the sound is going to change a little bit. Apologies.
That's also what made it relatable because like we've all been the person in the situation that says the awkward thing, and then in your head you're like, why did I say that? I should stop talking.
And that was, again, very validating to me to see that the reception that she got was better this time than the last time. Then we got into a bit more of a Q&A style conversation, and the first question that they asked was about if there's going to be a third book.
You kind of gave the epilogue and you told us kind of what happened in your future. Is there going to be a sequel then? Or
No,
is this,
this is it.
I
I told my editor, I said,
3, so you need one more book.
no, sticking with this.
Oh, stick with both.
That's why I did the epilogue, was because I was like, this
Oh,
is
okay.
This is the end.
this
okay.
is the end.
You have another book in
What's the next book about?
I do have another book in progress. Doesn't have a title or even a working title yet, but it's, you know, my editor hasn't even read it yet, so I only sent it off to her recently. But Marilyn made me promise to read something from it. So
Yes,
I'll read
that's
something.
good. Thank you.
But I'll do that after we're done with questions
did
because
okay.
it's on my
Okay.
phone. But
Yeah.
and I have cut out the reading that I did of Project Gilbert because my editor hasn't even read it yet, so I don't think I'm quite ready to share it with the world, but I am really excited to share it with you, and we'll come more to that in a minute. They also asked if I knew the ending or how I like plan things out. And I know I've talked a little bit about my planning style on this channel before, but I don't think I've talked specifically about the ending to this book and how it came to me because it was a very different experience. With the first book, I had sort of mapped it all out, even the ending from the beginning, and sort of wrote to that. The second one, I sort of outlined as much of it as I could, but I didn't know how it was gonna end. When I was sitting there when she's sat, you know, in the bathtub crying, going like, what is the third way? Like, there has to be a third option here. That was what I was saying to myself. Like, I was like, I need to find the third option because I'm not happy with either of these two options and they won't be happy with either of these two options. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I think that bringing Irene, the grandmother character, further into the story sort of gave me then the answer that I needed. She was able to sort of be the guide in that situation to help her figure out what she needed. They also asked if I've been to Greece, which I hadn't before I wrote the books, but I have now.
So, but when you're going to write like about a couple like this where they're in Greece, have you ever been to Greece, or do you research and study?
Yeah, I hadn't been to Greece before I started. My editor told me I want a book set in Santorini, and I said okay. So yeah, I did a lot of Google Maps. You can go into Google Street View and literally just click your way down the street and like look what's on there. So I just did a lot of that, a lot of research.
Because the beautiful descriptions, like of the scenery and the water and the flowers and things. You know, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, thank you.
What if she's been there and seen all this? You know, you always want.
I have now, but I hadn't before writing it. Yeah, I did get to go in September. So, and all of the locations, especially for places that I haven't been, I don't name the locations, like the specific restaurants or whatever, but I always find one that I can use as a reference. And the scene in this one where they're in the restaurant and she just like gets up and pays for it and leaves, that was based on a real restaurant that when we went in September, we went to Athens and then to Santorini. When we were in Athens, we did a cooking class and the chef found out that we were going to Santorini and said, oh, you need to go to this restaurant. And it was the restaurant I used as my point of reference. Yeah. So we got to go and eat there and it was wonderful. So,
That's cool.
Yeah. They asked about my character generation process as well, which I was a little self-conscious about my answer because I don't feel like I develop as detailed of characters as other authors. Not that they're not strong characters, but I don't necessarily know all the details about like what's their eye color, what's their hair color. Like until it becomes relevant to the story and until I want to include it in the narrative, I don't always know the answers to those questions. If I know when a character's birthday is, it's because we're celebrating it in the story. And I think that that's just a stylistic thing. Like for me, any unnecessary detail kind of bogs down my process, whereas for other people, it really helps them feel immersed in their characters and their storytelling.
Flesh out like a character. Do you do that before you even put them in a story? Do you think about what they look like, how tall they are they old, young?
Do you think about
what does Venus look like?
Not really. So when I have an idea for a story, I'm always thinking like, who is the right person to tell that story? What is their situation? Like if the story idea is not specific to a character already, so then I'm thinking about like who that character is as a person. What's the like character arc that they need to go on? What's the way that they need to grow in the story to support the story idea that I've had? And then I'll think about what they look like. But I don't do, you can do like worksheets, like there's one called the snowflake method where you're like fleshing out all the details and it's like you put their height and their birthday and stuff like that. And I've not done that. I just sort of have them in my mind and it tends to come out in the story. They also asked about my day job, which turned into a conversation about my writing routine. I do that from 9 to 6 every day, and then at 6 o'clock I log off, and 6 to 8 are my writing hours. So
Wow, right away.
Yeah. I find that's better for me because it helps me like set those boundaries. Yeah, because if I did it like in the morning before work, which I could do, I could write from 7 to 9, then it would be a lot harder for me to like force myself to log off at 6. But everyone at work knows that I write and they know that that's really important to me, and so they know that I'm logging off at 6. So, and I'm part of a writing group where we do like online writing sprints. So basically where you just go on a Zoom call and at the beginning of the hour you say what you're going to work on, and then everyone goes and works on things, and then at the end of the hour you say how you did and if you achieved what you wanted to achieve. And so I do 2 of those every day. And then there was a really big debate about Nikos's height, how tall he is. And I'm not going to give anything away because I think that I don't share it, and I think that can be left up to interpretation, whatever is going to help you fall in love with him. But let's just say my sister Shauna had quite a compelling argument for her own opinion?
She thinks that Nikos is 5'10".
No,
Me
no,
too.
no.
Yeah. I'm thinking like, I think he's 6'3".
He's 6'2", 6'3".
And whatever helps you enjoy chapter 15 the most is the right answer. The way some of the scenes go, being married, being a 5'4" woman married to a 6'4" man. He's not 6'4" if she's 5'4". He's 5'10".
No.
There'd be a lot more bending.
Is she 5'10"? Is she actually?
So when she's pushed up against the hotel door and he just like bunches up her dress, like that would be a whole thing if he was 6'4" and she was 5'4". That's for sure.
I had never really thought about it that way, Shauna.
There are two characters from book 1 that you find out in book 2 are queer. And when I was first asked this question, just because of where I was in North Carolina in a community not known for its progressivism with women my mother's age, I was a little bit concerned about answering this question, but I just answered super honestly, and everyone was really engaged with the conversation, really on board with the representation, and really enjoyed that element of the story. So I was pleasantly surprised and relieved by the response that that conversation got. And you can kind of hear that nervousness in my reply. I don't know, the world is made up of lots of different people, and I think that romance novels in general tend to be very straight, very white, and very heteronormative, and not everyone in someone's life is going to be that. And so I think that it was an important thing to, I don't know, to acknowledge. They then wanted to hear a little bit more about the editing process, and based on all the conversations I've cut out about the spicier scenes, I thought I'd take some of those conversations and use it as a metaphor for the editing process. Rounds of edits.
Sign it.
Yeah, structural edits would, okay, let's use sex as the metaphor here. Structural edits would be, we need more sex in this book, or the chemistry isn't quite there yet, or we need to make sure the sex scenes are saying something a little bit more. The line edits would be, if he's 6'4", he should be having to bend down to do this, like that kind of detail. The proofread is you spelled penis wrong. So I did one round of structural edits, which is far fewer than the first one. The first one I went through about 4 rounds of structural edits. And then they actually ended up, because I'm quite a clean writer in terms of like the line level and the proofread, I know grammar and punctuation quite well, so it's typically quite a clean manuscript. So my line edit and proofread were combined, so I only had 2 when you would normally have 3. Then the guys came back from the dinner they were having together, so my husband, my sister's husband, and my dad. And so we brought them into the room so the ladies could gawk at them and try to use them as confirmation of their suspicions of Nikos' height. Because my husband's 6'5", my sister's husband's 6'4", my dad's 6'2", so they're not short men. Guys, you can come in here.
It's so quiet.
They are being quiet.
Give them applause.
Here?
Come on.
So this is...
Okay, bye guys. Also, it's probably unsurprising because my mother raised me and I grew up with my sister, but hearing them talk about my books, they just get it. They just understand what I'm trying to achieve. And a lot of the other women did as well, but it's just really validating to see that the people that know me and love me the most are understanding what I was trying to achieve absolutely the way that I intended. I don't think that it's necessary for people to agree with the author's intentions or understand the author's intentions, and I actually think that it's the whole point of talking about books and sharing stories that people are going to have different takes on them based on their experiences, their personality. There's a really good quote from Joss Whedon where he says that art isn't your pet, it's your kid. It grows up and talks back to you. So the way that people look at and perceive and digest the things that you've created isn't always going to be equal to the inputs and the intentions that you had at the beginning. It's going to be through the lens and from the perspective of their unique experience, and that is what makes it art and not just a product. And I felt like this book club and getting to hear everyone's interpretations, and I feel this way when I read reviews as well, is such a great opportunity to sort of see that at work. And then from there, I did my reading from Project Gilbert, which I was really nervous about doing, but as I was reading it, I realized how proud I am of that work and like how far I've come as a writer. And that was it. That was the book club. While I was there, I did do some filming of another video that I'm going to be putting out, which is where I asked my friends and family how they feel about my books and me being an author and what I write. And let's just say that some of the interviews made me laugh.
My favorite parts of the book are the name.
So if you don't want to miss those, be sure to hit subscribe. They'll be coming your way soon. And of course, if you want me to speak to your book club, just let me know in the comments and we'll see if we can make it happen. And thank you especially to the ladies of my mom's book club. It was so much fun getting to talk with you all, and thank you so much for sharing your excitement and passion for my books with me. It's not something that I get to experience a ton, so thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.